Dorsey, Megan Myers, and Michael Mills. I'm going to ask them to just say hello to us and give us a little bit of a introduction of who they are and where they sit. Andrea, is it okay if we start with you?
What if I say no?
Then I get to introduce you, and you'll never know where that might go.
So, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. I am Andrea Gravel, Director of Online Learning at Carroll Community College, and I've been here almost 11 months.
Terrific. Thank you, Andrea. How about Megan? Would you go next, please?
Sure. I'm Megan Myers. I'm the Director of E-Learning at Howard Community College, and I've been here since May.
Okay, so relatively new. Deborah, how about you? What's your role at Hartford?
I am Director of Education, Wellness, and Community Engagement. I've been at Hartford for about 12 years. Previously, my title was a little different. It was a director position. So I have been in this role since July.
Okay, terrific. And would you say, if I could just follow up, would you say this new position that you're in, is it a higher level position? Was this a leadership role higher than what you previously held?
Yes, I went from overseeing direct reports, I think were 3, and now I have 7 or 8 and exponentially more indirect.
Okay, sure. Good, thank you. And finally, Michael, I know you've been doing this for a little bit longer in your leadership role. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Thanks, Larry. And when Larry mentioned the senior person, I think he was saying the old person. Yeah, I've been at Montgomery for about 10 years. I'm Vice President of E-Learning, Innovation, and Teaching Excellence. When I first started here, I oversaw just a very small group as a director, maybe 4 people. And since then, I now oversee all of our staff and faculty professional development, our digital learning centers, and our libraries. So it's about 100 people at some point.
That's quite a transition there from the smaller staff to a large operation like that, Michael.
Right.
So we're going to come back to you in a couple of minutes with some questions. And for you, I thought we might focus around some of what your expectations might be of new individuals moving into leadership roles. So
Great.
We'll park that idea and come back to you. Thank you. Megan, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just share a little bit about, as you transitioned into this leadership role, what was one of the things that surprised you about being now in this type of position?
Sure. So I actually was a faculty member at Howard Community College before I became the Director of E-Learning, and I was a chair of our ELECT committee, which is our e-learning committee, and I was part of building a roadmap for where we wanted to go, over the next 5 years. So I felt like I had a really good grasp of the institution and our goals and our plans. I knew who was who. I had a lot of support from our senior leadership. So all those things, right, sound like I should be off to a great start, and I was. But there's a lot of surprises, and the extent to which I'm a planner, right? I love to to develop a plan, budgetary plans, timeline plans, and the extent to which I've needed flexibility has surprised me. So when I came in, one of the first things I found out was one of our instructional designers had long planned her retirement, and nobody had said anything. And then the assistant director of e-learning had submitted his resignation like the next day. So I needed to do 2 hires immediately, and pretty much there was no one else working in my department. So August was interesting as we started the new semester. And then, just thinking about the goals that we have as an institution that I've been part of creating, a lot of those were, are constantly changing. There's the goals are stable, but new things are popping up all the time. And so there would be things that I would say, an early alert system. I really don't love our early alert system, but there's no chance that we'll get a different one. And a week ago, the new committee is being put together, and I think we're going to change early alert systems. So, that wasn't on my radar as even a possibility. And I think now, right, it will happen probably in the next year.
Megan, if I could follow up on, because I'm picking up a theme here in what you're describing. It sounds to me that your personality and your style as a faculty member was kind of self-directed, individualized. I mean, you were kind of managing your work, your research, your teaching, and so forth. Now you move into this administrative role, and although you have the skills and actually the desire to do the planning and the execution, you're in this larger, you're dependent upon other folks, right? And as you said, things are a little bit, they morph quicker. How have you had to make a personal adjustment to that style when you don't have control of all the variables?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my work as a faculty member was doing a lot of administrative work on, cross-functional teams and doing a lot of leadership. So I was doing that before, but I think as an institution, we weren't changing as quickly. So we've gone through an academic restructuring. We have a new BPAA. We have 4 out of 7 of our deans are new in the past year.
Wow.
So the level of change that we have gone, and our deans have been here for 30 years, right? So the speed of change that we have gone through as an institution has really changed. And so I was doing similar kinds of work before, but just the frequency of the things that would pop up that we as an institution would say that we would commit ourselves to. We would maybe say in academic affairs, we'll take on 3 major projects this year. And now we're taking on 7, major projects this year. And it's good. It's energizing, but I think everyone is adjusting to a new level of speed. And sometimes it's things that we're not, we're really expanding our dual enrollment program, and that isn't even something that academic affairs took on. That's something that the president committed the institution to. So you say, yep, right, we're gonna do that. And everyone is, gonna find a way to make it happen. But the frequency of change has changed throughout the institution, and I think that we're all adjusting to that up and down the chain.
It's interesting in that one of the topics we addressed in MOLLI, and I know it's been done for the last 2 years, has been this change management aspect. And I continually hear people say, change has always been part of our jobs. It's always been it's the speed and the intensity that seems to be increasing. And I don't know if that's a real phenomena or not, but it certainly sounds like what you're experiencing there. Andrea, I'm going to shift over to you with a question, and I think Megan probably would have experienced some of this as well, but let me go over to you. In your position, hearing what Megan talked about, how did the politics of these interactions come into play? Like, did that affect you at all?
Oh, of course, because politics are everywhere, literally everywhere. And of course, higher education politics are always a very interesting experience. Unlike Megan, who spent a number of years at her institution, I came in not knowing a soul. I moved here from Western New York to take this position. And I have to say, initially, I was thrilled to find out that Carroll is not nearly as dysfunctional as my former institution. Really scarily dysfunctional. But of course, politics plays a role. For me, learning the history of my department, which was basically without a leader for 3 years, became a really important aspect of how I am able to help direct the very important changes that need to be made here, because I had to understand, wow, people have just been allowed to go do whatever it is they feel like doing. And that created problems. The other thing is, just as Megan said, change. At Carroll, we are also undergoing significant change. Our Vice President of Academics has been here under 2 years. Our Associate Vice President of Academics has been here just over a year. So we're going through tons of change too. And that's where the politics come in, because architecturally at Carroll, we have the perfect architecture to encourage the silos. And so it's very hard to find out politically what is going on there.
Interesting. Megan, if I could just jump back to you for a second, was that a similar experience for you in terms of the politics in this dynamic change time that you've gone through?
To some extent, but the politics are changing. So it used to be that academic affairs and student services were constantly at odds with each other, and academic affairs always lost. But that has changed under our new VPAA and Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs, a really attempt to be more collaborative. And now there's a much more contentious relationship between some of the deans than there has been in the past. And so, the politics that I could have described a year ago or a year and a half ago aren't the same as they are now. And some of that is because some of the players are different, and just the interests are different than they were. I think preserving, the thing that I've learned is, like, the more you can preserve your flexibility, and that's, your time and your energy and a little bit of also your budget as well, is really important with everything that's happening.
Right. Interesting. Andrea, I was going to ask you a follow-up question regarding the politics piece. Is there anything in particular you've learned to do, or that you do as a practice to mitigate the effects of the politics?
Yeah, absolutely. Mea culpa. If I make a mistake, and it's inevitable, we all make mistakes, especially when you're new to an organization. I learned a long time ago, own it, fix it as best you can, move forward. And also, you have to learn who you can trust. And it's not the person that you think in the beginning. It inevitably ends up being someone else. But you need that person who's been around for a long time to help you understand the various politics that are happening. And then you also have to say, okay, that's your perspective. You're probably not 100% correct, but at least I have a perspective.
So it sounds to me as though in both of your cases, being actively engaged in the politics, which I always say politics is human nature, right? It's our interactions. We have politics in our households because of the interactions. But you've got to be thinking about it because you're at this higher level, you're working with other units. Your success is dependent on other people also being successful, and figuring out the network and who makes things happen is really an important part of this. Deborah, if I could move over to you for a question. When you moved into your role, what strategies or resources did you reach out to, or did you maybe find yourself drawn to in terms of helping you make this transition? Was it people? Was it reading? Was it organizations? Like, how did you find a way to support your own transition?
Well, I sort of feel like we're leading parallel lives, because we had many, many changes at our institution as well. We restructured everything and have new leadership. And so for me, it's been a challenge of negotiating those waters. And so strategies, one I think is the most important, is that I have maintained professional relationships with people external to the institution, who I can say, what's going on with this? And that they want me to be successful. And so that's, I think, been very helpful to be able to just talk through when you're experiencing adversity and talk about it with someone who is not connected necessarily to your institution, but does have your best interest in hand. I find, and this is going to sound sort of off topic, but I also have found that you really have to maintain your personal interests as well. That really the resources that are important are the ones that sort of are meaningful to you and give you a lot of, just feeling good. And there are times when, you're in a new leadership position that you don't always feel that good. And so for me, it's been being consistent with my interests, whether they're similar to higher education or otherwise. And that's
it's an interesting point. It's not one I've thought about before, but I think what I hear you saying is it's important to pay attention to your own needs, to your own health, right? Mm-hmm. And we did talk about this at MOLLI. We talked about the importance of removing yourself from the work, of getting into a space where you are comfortable and where you have confidence and things that you enjoy. Is that what you're referring to? Sort of outside interest, like not. So, and I'm not quite sure. I'm wondering if you can give us an example. I'm struggling a little bit with what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm also struggling with making it happen because I'm talking more about, I guess, sort of work-life balance. And I think sometimes, when you're in a new position and you really want to demonstrate that you can do the job and that you're meeting expectations, you have a tendency to lose sight of that and want to always stay plugged in. And I think one of the things I've sort of come to realize is that you need to have those times where you're not plugged in so that you can maintain quality of your work and enthusiasm for it. So even though it resulted in a problem, getting outside and hiking, it was something that I had sort of let fall away, and having something that can provide you with an outlet for thinking or just switching gears and not being so plugged in. I think is helpful. But there are elements probably of all of our jobs where when we go into leadership positions, we feel like they sort of go away and they were meaningful to us. So also looking for things that are connected to higher education. Hi, Wendy. And, but that, and maybe they're not so much part of your job now, but they're meaningful to you, and connect in with that. And that can really help sustain your enthusiasm for what you do.
I think those are great strategies. There's three that I kind of took away from what you said. You didn't say this directly, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard you talk about the need to have connections with individuals who can understand, reflect back, give you guidance. And I'm going to guess that might happen internal to your organization, but it might be a little harder internally because you got to be careful with the politics, right?
Yes.
But having a colleague or a mentor or somebody external who understands your context, so understands higher education and all that, and who can maybe give you insights or guidance, who doesn't have a vested interest. And the third strategy I heard was maintaining your interest, maintaining things that bring you joy and happiness in life, whether it's family or whether it's sports or whatever, that it's important to keep those things up in order to find that work-life balance.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. And if you find yourself moving away from that, it's never too late to get back to that place. So, because I think a lot of times what we assume to be the expectations of our new position are not always real. We're actually setting those for ourselves. And so trying to figure out, trying to be self-aware and know those things, it's a learning process.
Yeah, that's a great observation. What we project onto ourselves about those expectations. So maybe this is a good transition to Michael. Michael, you've been in this senior leadership role for a while. Is it Michael or Mike? Which do you prefer?
Mike.
Okay, terrific.
Generally, the only person who called me Michael was my late mom. when I was in trouble. So
okay, good to know, Mike. So you're not in trouble here. So Mike, I'm wondering, as you transition new leaders into your organization, what are your expectations for their incoming skills? But then also, I'm kind of curious as to what are your strategies to help them succeed? And I forget, it might have been Deborah who said, they want you to succeed, which is a really positive thought here. Nobody wants to see you fail in your new leadership role. So what are your expectations for them coming in? And then what do you do as an administrator to help guide and move that individual forward in their career?
Sure. Certainly we want people to succeed, but I take a slightly different tack with the failure, because I also want people to know they can fail. They can propose a project, propose an idea, and if it doesn't work, it simply doesn't work. And I want to stress that to them, that not everything we do is going to work. In higher ed, we may be changing lives, but it's not life or death. And so I stress to people that I'm hiring that I want you to have a healthy sense of failure and know what it is like to fail. I was doing a second interview with a couple people recently, and they asked me what my leadership style was. And I said, I like to fail and I like to encourage failure. And they looked at me like, you have lost your mind. But it was at that particular moment that I knew in one case that person was not the right choice for this organization. Because I want people to do what is right, but I don't necessarily want them to play it safe all the time. Because I want to advance. And I think sometimes the only way we can advance and understand our success is if we fail. So I talk a lot about not having this fear of failure as I'm developing new leaders.
Mike, before you go on, that you're bringing up a thought in my mind about this whole issue around failure, and I agree with you about the general concept. But I'm wondering, you must have, so there's different kind of failures, and what you're describing, I think, is you're encouraging people to try. You're encouraging people to maybe find a solution, be passionate about it, and advance it. And I've got your back if it doesn't work. But you do have some criteria around that failure, in that they are trying, right?
Yes.
They're earnest. That is based on some sense of a possibility of success. I'm not going to go after an initiative that I know is going to fail. Right. Do you have those criteria?
Yeah, and a lot of it centers around this idea of innovation and just being innovative, and what does that mean for our organization? So a number of years ago, when the MOOC craze was big, I was working with an English faculty member who wanted to develop a MOOC for English, and she did, and we ended up being the first community college in Maryland to do one. But it was brutal from within the institution, within the discipline, the politics that got involved. But we knew it was the right thing to do. The success of the students in there wasn't great. It was typical of MOOCs. But we were able to take that content and use it in other ways. So while the MOOC itself may have failed, the concept did not, and we were able to move our stuff forward as a result of that. So I think your point about leaders understanding that they need to have the backs of the people they're working with is crucial, because otherwise a lot of this can just come tumbling down.
So along those lines, your leadership style then is to convey to these new leaders in your organization that you're encouraging them to be innovative, to step out of their comfort zone, right? To be to take calculated risks. Right. I mean, that's one of the things you're looking for. So what do you do as a leader to help foster that kind of an environment?
Well, a few years ago, I had my staff during their performance evaluations, when we were looking at their goals for the next year, they had to come up with an innovative idea. And that innovative idea, that innovative goal could be whatever they wanted to do as it related to the institution. It didn't necessarily have to relate to what they were, their specific job. So I had one particular individual who wanted to do a retreat for faculty and just talk about the scholarship of teaching. And the proposal was a small idea, maybe 10 people. Well, by the time we got done discussing it and talking about it, it blossomed into an entire Saturday event that we now call the Love of Teaching, that attracts maybe 100 people on a Saturday. So taking that, just that nugget of innovation and working through it and expanding. So to me, it's just giving people the freedom to explore.
Right. I love that philosophy. I love that approach and the encouragement that you're providing. I think what you're doing is you're sort of setting the table for these leaders to explore, try new ideas. That's what you're looking for. But also, it sounds to me as communication is crucial here, right? That I had a supervisor one time who would say to me, Larry, amaze me, but don't surprise me.
Right.
That he never wanted to be at an event someplace and someone says, oh, did you hear what Larry did? Or we really appreciated this or whatever, or it failed. And he not know about that. So that communication piece was really pretty critical.
I have stressed that to my staff since I've been here, that I don't want to go into a meeting and be surprised. If something has come up that is a negative, just tell me. I just don't want to hear about it from someone else because then I cannot respond to it in a timely manner, and I don't want to be caught off guard like that.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well, thank you all. Thanks to our panelists there. Before I open it up for other input from the community, Doug, I don't want to leave you out of this conversation. You've got years of leadership experience as well. And I'm wondering if you could give us a little reflection on what you've heard today from our three relatively new to leadership roles, and then what Mike's input is as well. What are your thoughts?
Sure. I think that, the experience of moving into a new management position is sort of universal in that everybody experiences the same challenges. I mean, they're different by institution, by size of institution, by size of the staff that you're working with. But it's all alike, and I think that's one of the useful things about maintaining your connections to outside organizations, like in the area of online learning, MDLA, Maryland Online, getting those connections so that you don't feel like you're alone. As I think it was one of our folks said, nobody wants you to fail. They're behind you. And that's so important, making that connection with the people both above you, below you, and in other silos of the organization. So I think that's all very useful. And I guess I would put it back as a question to our panelists. What are the one or two things that you really attribute your success to?
I see Deborah smiling there, so maybe she'll jump in.
So not to sound like I'm so wonderful, but one of the things I attribute my success to is me. I know that I have a very strong work ethic, and that's something that I should use, that I really need to use to my advantage. I go back to having people that can support you. And even when it's somebody who perhaps was with your organization, but then they left, but they were there for a while, that, the success that I've had has been not being afraid, I guess, to reach out to those people and ask for historical context. And that's very helpful to have context for a situation. Those are my two.
Yeah, good. Andrea, can we go to you? Andrea, I think you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's
So
okay.
for me, I would say I have to basically reiterate what's been said. Is part of my success is named Andrea, because I have a strong work ethic. I'm tenacious, all of that stuff. But what is also making me successful here is my boss. I know she has my back. We have exceptional communication, and that makes a difference. And I also have people surrounding me who are very, very supportive of the initiatives that I want to institute. And they give me truthful feedback, which is critical when you're new to an institution.
Yeah.
So, and also my former boss, because he keeps telling me what it's like to be a director.
So it sounds like it's people, people, people.
It is people.
And communications and building that support system ultimately. Yeah. It's funny because you didn't say money or you didn't say power. It's about those connections.
Yeah, it's all about the connections and the people. Absolutely.
I'd like to hear what the other folks have to say on this as well, but I want to pull something out from what Deb told us. You know, there is a tendency for folks to hide their light under the barrel. You have to feel free not just to let folks know when you've made a mistake, but publicize your successes. When you've done good, you know, there is a tendency for too much modesty, and letting people know that you are good is important.
Thanks, Doug. Megan, can we hear from you? And then I'm also curious from the other participants online, this question, well, two questions in my mind. I'm going to just plant them. One is, what has so far in your role helped you be successful, but also maybe what you're struggling with a little bit, and we can put that back to the panelists. But let's hear from Megan first.
So as far as the successful piece, it's similar to what we've heard, but collaboration and honesty. So, you know, if there's something that I can do, that, you know, my team can do, we will do everything in our power to do it. And if we can't, we can't, you know. And if there was a reason why, you know, I try to just be as honest with every single person as I can. I spend an enormous amount of time in meetings, but it's because we have a huge amount of silos historically, and I'm doing everything possible to break that down. And so that means a lot of time on the ground for me with people, building back trust. We didn't have a director of e-learning for 1.5 years. And so it's just a lot of work trying to kind of reestablish communication with everyone and you know, tell people that we're going to be there for them and work with them. And if there's something we can't do, explain why that is. So, you know, that's the positive, right? That's the good piece. And that means that people have been very responsive to that. As far as, you know, challenges, it is the scope of the work with the number of people that we have, and, you know, the kinds of things that I keep thinking we kind of put something to bed, and then it'll keep coming up. And because we did not have a director of e-learning for 1.5 years, there's like landmines everywhere, you know. So, you know, I feel like we've kind of settled everything, and I wake up one morning and something's on fire, and I have a full day scheduled, and we already have work, and now I have to, you know, try to manage all of that. So, you know, I think it'll probably be another 6 months or a year until I stop being surprised by those little things.
Sure.
And it's nothing that anyone did, or, you know, it's just that sometimes if you don't have all of that communication built in, a lot of people did things because nobody told them that they couldn't do something, right? And so they just like pushed a lot of buttons, right? And who knows what happened. So, you know, there've just been a lot of little surprises along the way.
So now you're unpacking those consequences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little at a time.
I think your observation is a good one. And I think it's a good leadership perspective as well, is until you go through probably a couple cycles of the process, right? It might not be revealed on the first cycle, but on the second cycle or the third cycle is where you'll begin to see those patterns and then say, wait a minute, why are we doing it this way? Oh, well, that was a stopgap measure 4 years ago and we haven't changed it. So you've got to give yourself time, I guess is what I'm hearing as well, to understand how the system works. Yeah. Thank you, Megan. So let me turn to our audience here, Jeremy and Marianne and Michelle, the rest of the group. Calling out your names, but that's just because I'm scrolling down the list here. I don't mean to pinpoint anybody. Any questions or thoughts or maybe challenges, things that you're dealing with that you might want to raise to our panel?
Larry, there are a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
Really, one from Mike that says he would love to hear from our guests what they think would keep them up at night as a leader, and Julie follows on to that says she thinks that maybe everything that she's heard so far is maybe too Pollyanna-ish. When there are bad neighbors and backstabbers in the reporting line. So how do people deal with that?
Sure. That's a good one. Does anyone on our call today want to jump in on that one?
I will.
Go ahead, Deborah.
I think that to deal with those things, you need to commit yourself to always being diplomatic and not engaging in gossip. I think we have to go with our gut. And if it feels ugly or bad, then you just don't engage. I have a colleague who's really great at that. And I learned from her to go, and then quickly change the subject, because there is an expectation as a leader that you will conduct yourself accordingly, even if there are places within your organization that maybe you feel do not do that. It's always good to, I think for me, I just always try to maintain, I like to use the analogy of telephone when we used to sit around, and it would start with one person and make its way around, and, start it from I like, Bob's shirt to I hate so-and-so, right? And so sometimes people inflect their own personal feelings about what they report. And I think you can navigate those waters if you just don't engage.
So it's about, Deborah, what you're saying is about personal integrity here.
Yeah.
Deborah, is there a time, though, where you have to call people on behaviors? So it's one thing to sort of deflect or ignore, but is there also a time where you need to say to someone, that's not a fair representation of so-and-so or that initiative, and interject a different lens, a different view on that topic?
Yes. I oftentimes have to do it with the people that I support, where maybe they've handled a situation not with the best. And so I have a rule that I never will throw anybody under the bus. If I'm trying to manage it at the next level, I say, I think their intentions were good. And then I take that person aside and we talk about why it wasn't so great to do that and what they could do, the next time. But sort of, I think that when you're going to challenge leadership above you, you need to be very strategic in how you go about that, and use really good judgment as to how you want to say that, because not everybody is going to receive it the same way. And sometimes the best thing to do, especially in a group, is to remain neutral and then talk to that person separately.
Good, thank you.
Larry, For me, I try to take the approach that, praise in public, but reprimand in private. And that seems to work. And then to follow up on what Debbie was saying, I try to work with people who are not like me. My staff is wonderful, but I don't want to have an entire staff of me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't even want to have me. But, I think if you surround yourself with people who are just like you, then that stifles that creativity. And, I think there are opportunities as leaders, we can mentor people both below us and above us. And I think it's how do you manage up? That is that political aspect that takes time to learn.
Again, Mike, I'm going to guess that's a lot about communications and a lot about establishing those lines of dialogue so that when you need to have those difficult discussions, you've opened up, you've built, and I forget who said a little bit earlier on, it might have been Megan, used the word trust, is that you have to build the level of intimacy that comes from, I know that you're a good person. I know that your intentions were such, but we have a problem and we need to be able to talk about that problem.
Larry, we have 4 more questions that have come up in the meantime. So we're going to have to really work to move through these, I think, fairly fast. We will be able, I think, to run through a bit. One question is that, what might keep me up at night is not having support from my administrators. Mm-hmm. It's important to know. So I guess the question is, what do you do if you don't have the support of your supervisor? Second question is the eternal issue of I'm having a tough time balancing teaching schedule with my associate director duties. There's not enough time in the day. Third one, which is always an interesting one, is from Michelle. I'd like to hear about a mistake made early in your leadership career, how you recovered and what you learned from that mistake. And then finally, I would love to hear more on managing up from Sherry. So,
boy, that's a great batch of questions there. So why don't we start with the first one, if that's okay, and talk about the idea, if anyone wants to step into that role, what if I don't have supportive administration leadership above me? What have been some strategies that folks have found that have worked?
For me, that was an easy solution. I changed institutions because it just wasn't working for me. And so I had a career choice to make, and I know some people aren't in that position, but for me, I was fortunate I could make that change. But it was unbearable for me. I just had to leave the organization.
Mike, let's say that's not an option. I realize that sometimes that presents itself, and that's the way you go about it. Any other strategies on you've got an individual above you who maybe you're not aligned with, maybe you don't quite understand their goal and their visions, or you do and you can't get in alignment with that, right? Any suggestions on how to correct that alignment? Well,
so can I say one thing is, I think there's 2 things here. One is it might be that you're in line with your administrator, but that, and this goes to the managing up thing, you're actually helping your senior administrator with the president or with another senior administrator, right? And so, probably your boss also has a boss, right? Or also has other goals that they're trying to achieve. And one of the ways that, you can really prove your value is helping them achieve their goals. So that's something that I think has been very helpful to me. And then something that I've seen, kind of work in my area is that if someone has a natural rapport with your boss and it's not you, right, then look at how that's operating, right? So what is that person doing? Because some people just get along better, and that's not a knock on you, right? It's just that for some people, they have an easier connection. And so how is it working? How is that person able to kind of plant a seed in that other person's mind that is coming back, and like they might have disagreed on a point, and the other employee planted a seed, and then that other, the supervisor came back and said, yeah, I've been thinking about it and now I agree, right? So what did that look like? And then how could you possibly, replicate that situation? And so if there's somebody else that is another direct report, that does have that kind of relationship, watch it, right? Try to see if you can replicate it.
Sounds again like Megan about communications, working the network.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I hope that gives a few ideas there. Doug, did you want to add anything in, or?
I think I agree entirely that it's making the connections. If you don't have it, I mean, as Mike says, if you're totally out of alignment, sometimes the person in power, you've got to decide whether you want to align with them or move elsewhere. But making the connections and building the support at other parts of the institution so that that you have other folks who will support you. I think that's essential for dealing with that. And to some extent, if your manager, I will tell you that, one time early in my career, I had a manager who didn't think much of me. It took a year for me to build the connection with that person so that they were supportive of me. Sometimes it takes perseverance.
Yes, yeah.
And Larry, I think your point about communication is crucial in this concept of managing up or mentoring up, because it's not just, for those who you may lead, but those who are leading you as well. And keeping that dialogue open both ways can go a very long way in helping you be successful.
Good. Thanks, Mike. Okay, we've got just 2 minutes left, and I am curious about this question that was presented about your mistakes early in your leadership. Can I ask each of the panelists, we have 4, to give us what's one thing you did or maybe didn't do early on in your career that you look back now, say, darn it, I wish if I had a chance, I might do that over again. I'm going to start with Andrea, if that's okay, Andrea, to put you on the spot there. Any thoughts come to mind?
So my leadership started so long ago, I don't think I can remember back that far. That being said, early on in my career at Carroll, I messed up big time with the implementation of a template for our online courses. And the way I fixed it was I said, you know what? Couple of things. Literally, people didn't communicate certain things to me. Had I known, I would never have made the decision that I made.
I see.
I changed the rollout deadlines to help the faculty. I have done it. I have taken courses and literally set them up in the template for faculty. And that has broken so much ice where people think, oh, she's not an ogre. She's, a fairly nice human being most of the time. And it's made my experience here at Carroll much better than it could have been worse, put it that way.
Okay, good. Debbie, can we go to you? Thank you, Andrea. Can we go to you? What was something you might have done that looking back, you wish you hadn't?
Well, you should never send emails out when you're really upset about something. And if you do, and you've stepped in it, then you really do need to apologize and own it. And a lot of times, and it will sound really strange, but sometimes really good relationships develop after that, because I think on some level, people need to see that you're a human and that when you mess up, you have that, integrity to go back and go, yep, that was me, and I shouldn't have acted that way, and I'm very sorry, and I'll make it better. I'd like to say that that's never happened to me, but it happens. And so, but really to prevent it, just don't send it. Use your gut check again.
Wait till you pull down. All right, good. Thank you. Megan, how about you? What's something that you learned as a lesson?
Yeah, I think about, trying to temper enthusiasm of your team as far as the scale of a project. So this was just a couple of years ago, and, we were, Charge was taking on this massive project, and it was a very enthusiastic group of staff and faculty, an amazing group. And we were going with it, right? We were running with it. And the scale of work was really incredible. And I think instead of me seeing that, I was saying, okay, I'm going to lead, I'm going to get us to this great result. And I think what I should have done is say, no, right? Like, we need to actually take this down so that we don't kill ourselves.
That sounds like managing expectations.
Mm-hmm. And making and resource management, right? To really understand this is what is possible, so that it is a sustainable project, so that we come out of it feeling positive about what we did.
Sure.
And so the thing that I did to get us through it is I took on as much of it as I could to try to, take away some of the pain from the rest of the team, which was harder on me. But in the future, right, that's why I try to be thoughtful about workload. So, having those wonderful experiences and the big ideas, but, also being really mindful about making sure that people feel positive at the end.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan. Mike, I'm going to leave it to you with your last thought. What was a lesson you learned or a mistake you made that you learned from?
Two quick things. One, I early on in my career, I was in the newspaper industry. I failed to take into account the strengths and weaknesses of my team. So I was taking a lot of stuff on myself instead of delegating or collaborating. And then the other thing that I think I've learned over the years is to think big picture. And my team has heard me say before, go big or go home. And I just loved looking at big picture, and I don't think I did that enough early on in my career.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. It's a great note to end on. Folks, thank you so much for your interaction today. I'm sorry if we didn't get to all of the questions, but I think we got some great insights. Please join me in virtually thanking our panelists for joining us today. And as I said earlier, thank you, Doug, for taking this on and getting us set up for this kind of discussion. I very much appreciate your being here and your candor, and we'll look forward to an additional one in February. Doug, any closing words?
I'd just like to thank everyone for attending this morning. I think that we could have gone on for quite a bit longer. Some great questions that could, I think that some of these questions we could build into an entire webinar on their own. So thank you all for participating today. And we'll send out information on the February webinar. And if you're interested, send me a note and I'll send you some more information on MOLLI 2019. So thanks a lot, folks.
Thank you all, folks.
Thanks, Larry.
Take care. Enjoy your day and have a great holidays.
Bye, everyone.